Loyola Medical School is engaging in LGBT indoctrination. And this is happening it's happening at every level, including our medical schools. Joining us now to talk about this, Meg Kilgannon, Senior Fellow for Education Studies here at the Family Research Council. Meg, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
All right, so Loyola is a Catholic school. What's going on?
Well, I'm very sorry as a Catholic to report that Loyola is in their medical school has a class for family doctors, students who are studying to be family practitioners, a course about LGBTQ healthcare in which they teach the students that gender affirming care, quote unquote, is good medical practice and a standard of care that they should adopt. And of course, this goes against church teaching on gender identity. Even Pope Francis has been very clear that gender identity, gender ideology is evil. It is contrary to the dignity of the human person. And the fact that a Catholic college would teach this class to Catholic physicians is just really disturbing. But it makes the point that our institutions have been captured and that Catholic universities and Christian universities are always a huge target for these subversive forces that want to undermine the nuclear family, undermine the church, undermine God's law. They attack institutions like Loyola and Georgetown and other colleges and infiltrate with classes just like this one.
But this is how you change a culture. I mean, we're seeing it. We talk about it weekly, what's happening in the classroom, in elementary and secondary education. And now we're talking about the professions, medical care. If you're a medical student, you're not going to, very few are going to object to this and raise a ruckus about it because they want to pass. They want to get through medical school so they can become a doctor. So they're forcing them into a mold, which over time, because of their acquiescence, because they have to if they want to finish medical school, this becomes the norm.
Right. And of course, when you're in postgraduate studies and in medical school, you're probably going to graduate with a tremendous amount of debt, right? And so you don't want to get kicked out of school because you made noise about a diversity, equity, and inclusion issue, right? You want to graduate and set up your practice, and you want to be able to pay back your student loans just for starters, and hopefully have a nice income for your own family. And so the idea that a Catholic institution again would teach a course that would encourage medical students to, instead of getting to the root of whatever is causing this crisis within a person, that they think they're born in the wrong body, instead of helping a student with loving advice that is going to honor God's plan for each of us and the fact that you cannot be born in the wrong body. They're going to teach medical students that they need to screen for gender identity issues. They're going to coach them into how to talk about this with your patient, maybe outside a parent's listening ear. This is just such a divisive ideology, and it is just really disturbing that Loyola would do this. But we know that also Loyola covers abortion and contraception in their student health plan. So this is a university that is clearly struggling in its Catholic identity. It has an identity crisis of its own. And I certainly hope that my church will be clear in giving guidance to these institutions that are under pressure from forces without.
Maybe they're transitioning to a secular university. But think about it. I'm going to go back to a couple of things you said. Number one, and we've talked about this on the program with Dr. Bowens, that there's usually an underlying issue here, and that's where the counseling comes in, which would be normal in a protocol of treatment. Would be, all right, what's going on here? We ask questions, but this is assuming and immediately moving down this path of gender dysphoria based upon conflict in your biological sex with who you think you are. And the only way to resolve that is experimental drugs and hormone treatment or surgeries. So it bypasses the understanding, and this is what we should have from a religious institution, understanding that we're spiritual beings. And God created us in his image, and therefore there's something that's happened in our fallen nature and in this fallen world that needs to be looked at from a holistic perspective. And if a Catholic university or religious-based institution is not looking at it from that perspective, then how can we expect the secular to do any better?
Well, exactly, Tony. And as a Catholic, if these students are attending a Catholic university, I hope it's because they're going to become Catholic doctors. They're going to be allowing their faith to inform the medical care that they provide to their patients. Because as a Catholic who's seeking health care for my family, that's what I want. I want health care from people who understand the dignity of the human person and value human life and endorse and agree with all the teachings of the church. And so when this is not the case, it's so discouraging for us, the lay faithful, that we have to do an additional level of, it's not enough to just find out that you're going to a Catholic physician. You need to now find out, do they actually agree with the teachings of the church? And this, of course, is true for people of other faiths as well. You look for a Christian doctor, you look for a Christian therapist, and then you have to ask, but are they really following biblical principles, right? And so this just goes back to the importance of really spiritually forming your children well, of engaging with everybody, teachers, doctors, anybody who's providing a service to your children is going to impact them in a very significant way. You really need to know what is going on. And you don't have to leave the exam room when your child is at the pediatrician's office. You need to be consulted as a parent when you're getting services from your school.
So how do we
just
help?
really never been more important than now for us to be engaged in these things.
Meg Kilgannon, let me ask you this question. I'm sure there's external factors coming into play here. There's pressures being applied to Loyola, although I don't think they're resisting, but I do think there's external factors to be considered here. But how do we help young people? We have the same question when it comes to the military and the woke policies of the military. I want men and women of faith in our military because I want a moral compass from those who carry big guns and control the weapons of mass destruction. The same thing is true with doctors. I want doctors and nurses and surgeons that have a moral compass, that understand that we are a spiritual being. I want a holistic approach. I love it when I got a doctor who, of course, most of my doctors are Christians because I know them, they're friends, and they'll pray with me. How do we help our children that are considering the profession of going into medicine? How do we encourage them to take that route, given what we're seeing here, even in some of these religious institutions?
Well, they're going to have to go in as evangelizers, right? If they're going to go into this profession, they need to be very wise in how they choose to reveal this part of their character to people. It will be evident, right? We know that. But they need to be aware that if they're going to choose these professions, there are going to be additional hurdles for them as Christians. And I think really the message from the culture makes that perfectly clear, regardless, right? Regardless of your chosen profession. We're living in an age where we're no longer living in a country that's majority Christian. Certainly, the culture is very captured by the spirit of the world, right? And so it's really important for us to make sure our children are prepared to be witnesses and perhaps even suffer a form of martyrdom in that witness.
It begins in the home, and as we've talked about on this program many times, a worldview being formed from 15 months of age until the age of 13. That is when a worldview is formed. As parents, we need to be equipping, preparing our children to go into a hostile environment as a cheerful witness, filled with peace in a world of great challenge, a tumultuous world, because that's what Jesus promised us. Meg Kilgannon, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tony.